All right, we're live. I'm late. I apologize. It is my fault. I was worried about my lighting and my hair. So I'm sorry, Jacksonville. I got a little poof here and it's been a long day. So, but we're on. We made it. It's 8:02. It's the Living in Jacksonville channel and we're talking real estate. But tonight we're talking about home insurance, which I'm super excited about. I haven't had Leah on in ages, my Brightway agent. How are you doing, Miss Leah?
I am doing so good. I know it's been a while, so I'm happy to be back.
Yes. Leah, if you haven't watched my videos in the past, we talked about Florida insurance it's been at least a year, I think. But Leah is one of my favorite local agents here. And I always tell folks, especially since we're a big relocation channel, make sure you talk to a local insurance agent that knows what they're doing and has been doing business in this area for a while, because if they don't know the area and they don't know what they're doing, it's not a good idea. So someone who's native, someone who's in the area, that's Leah. You need to talk to her because she's very well versed in what's going on. She's been doing it a long time. So I'm very honored to have you tonight. Thank you, Leah. And then, of course, Miss Rachel's still sticking around, even though she has to deal with me on Thursday nights. But Miss Rachel, you prepared. Say that again.
I love it. I love to be here.
Oh, that's sweet of you. So, Miss Rachel, what have you got? What are we going to talk about tonight, as well as home insurance?
Well, we'll talk about hurricane preparedness and just different things you should know, little tidbits that I feel like I've learned as a Florida native, and just a little just stuff you should know getting into
hurricanes. Do we get hurricanes in Jacksonville? Come on, Rachel, don't be such a Debbie Downer.
It's always good to be prepared.
It's always good to be prepared. You're absolutely, knock on wood. I got to be honest though. I've been very bullish with the fact that I'm like, there's a reason why all my fellow South Florida people are moving up here in the droves. And I don't take this lightly. I feel horrible because my family has suffered tremendously from hurricanes in the past because I grew up in the Caribbean. But when you kind of get used to it, you sometimes underestimate what these storms can do. But the fact that Fort Myers and Southwest has been hammered so much, not just by the hurricanes, but the flooding, the surges, and the storms. It's so important, people, to understand how important it is to be prepared, to take it seriously, not to take it lightly. But I always use that as a fact that those areas which are becoming harder and harder to get home insurance at all, or even your house fully insured. Like I know you can get home insurance in Sarasota for your house, but you may not be able to get it for your caged in screen for your pool, or you may not be able to get it for your roof. I'm like, so what's the point, right? I mean, if you can only have certain things insured, and the coastal areas, a lot of those folks have so much money that they don't really care anyway, because they can pay to replace the home if it gets swept away. But the folks that are feeling it with the economy and everything, when they realize, when I lived in South Florida paying $6,400 a year on that house 7 years ago, which is probably 9, 10, 12,000 a year now, that I can still live, I don't know what, 4 or 5 miles from the beach, and my insurance only be $2,300 a year for a 3,400 square foot house. That's a big difference. That's a lot of savings. So it's definitely a consideration of why some people are moving from South Florida, Southwest Florida, Southeast Florida to Central Florida, Orlando, and Jacksonville. These areas are growing dramatically because of that. So before I get into it totally, for anybody who's watching tonight, this is an interactive show. If you ask intelligent conversations, we will respond to them. You ask dumb questions, I'm not even going to post them. So we like to pretend like we're smart. So pretend to be smart with us tonight and ask us cool questions, because somebody may be thinking the same question, but no question's too dumb. But we'd love to know also where you're watching from. It's always super cool to kind of check out where people are watching from on the channel. So it's interactive, so comment on it. So we'll start off with Miss Leah. Leah, what's going on? Like, what's most notable in the home insurance industry right now that you're noticing that people are talking about?
Yeah, definitely. So I will say, I've been. Oh, can you hear me?
Rachel, can you hear her?
Yeah, I can hear her.
Can you hear me?
Why am I not hearing? All right.
I don't think I'm on mute. Is this better?
I can hear you.
Okay. Greg, are you hearing me right now?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm having technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I would say, a little background, I've been doing insurance since 2020. So that was definitely, I came in at a rough point in insurance. So now 2025, I will say we're seeing, more companies and carriers come into the business, which that is just a good thing to have more options. So we are seeing that grow, which is great. I will say that there are some things within policies, though, that are changing. So there has been some things, especially around roofs, like Greg was mentioning, where it is kind of hard to get the full replacement value on a roof right now. A lot of carriers are going towards this like roof schedule thing where basically the older your roof is, the less they are paying out for that. So that's definitely something to pay attention to. A lot of agents and policies are just like, it might renew with that. Once your roof hits a certain age, kind of that mark is like the 15-year mark. So I would pay attention to that in your policies to make sure, obviously, it's best to have the replacement, but it is on the other side of that, a good option for, some people might have a 20, 25-year-old shingle roof, and maybe they can't afford, an $8,000 policy that affords the full replacement cost. So they're still able to get a reasonably priced policy, knowing that, hey, if something happens to your roof, maybe they'll give you, instead of the full cost to replace it, maybe they'll give you, 60% of what that's going to cost. So it definitely has its benefits, but I would just say be aware of that. But that's something that's big right now in the industry. But overall, it's a healthy market right now. We're seeing a lot of carriers come in. We're having more carriers like work with us a little bit more. Before, it would just be hard nose on things, where now they're willing to listen to the story, willing to work with us. If there's, something like an older roof or water heater or past claims or really just anything, we're just having carriers be more, willing to work with us. So that's always a good sign as well.
Are we seeing that roofing thing happen here in Northeast Florida as well? Because I know Brightway, your brokerage, you cover all of Florida, correct?
We do. Yep. So we work all of Florida. I would definitely say I'm more familiar, of course, with the Northeast area. So Ponte Vedra, St. Augustine, Jacksonville, Middleburg, kind of these areas around here. But no, absolutely. The roof, it's called like roof scheduling is what they call it. But we are seeing that across the state. It's really just how old the roof is. So before, carriers would just say, hey, if you have a 15-year-old roof, you're not even eligible. Now they're saying you have a 15-year-old roof, you can have coverage. You're just not going to have that full replacement on the roof. So, but yeah, we're definitely seeing that up here as well.
Okay. Interesting. There was also all that issues with, the roof, the scams going on with insurance, where people were roofing companies were doing false claims and whatnot, and that surged our insurance prices up higher as well. As far as flood, I always tell people it's worth getting it. First off, my first thought initially was because I do a lot of new construction, people are like, well, the new construction world in Northeast Florida is huge. We're fortunate that we have that, right? So not only are we seeing a lot of major incentives with builders, which is making our resale market very difficult, because if you can go and buy a new construction home and then get all these incentives that will buy down your rate, not just two-year buy down, but I've seen some incentives that affect the 30-year rate. Also, you're thinking, well, if I'm getting home insurance on a brand new house, you don't have to worry about all those issues, right?
Oh yeah, no, the new homes in the insurance world, that's what they love. Everything's brand new, everything's up to code.
Yeah.
That's what they like to see. So that's definitely the best rates. You're not having to worry about all those crazy endorsements that they're adding on. You're going to get, the best rates, the best policies for those.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to know was, correct me if I'm wrong, and this might be a generalization, and we're all talking opinion here, people. So there's no right or wrong answers, and we're not lawyers, and we're not pretending to be, there'll be something in the bottom of the description here that says this is purely opinion. We're not taking any responsibility for anything. We're just chatting. But do you find that St. Augustine, there's more requirements and a lot more people conscientious about flood down there in those regions? And are those flood policies a little higher than, say, in the Ponte Vedra area, or is it pretty equal, whether you're on Ponte Vedra Beach or here in Nocatee? Or
So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely an interesting question. I would say overall, St. Augustine is definitely going to have a little bit higher rates, and something too that, well, I guess it really doesn't affect like new construction homes, but something that they look at, of course, is like prior claims. So we have had people, in St. Augustine who went through Matthew and Irma, and, they might have a prior flood claim. So that can affect things. But if you're, the new construction homes, that's obviously not going to be an issue there. I will say too, our agency specifically, we did just get like a brand new flood rating system where it's given us access to, we used to maybe have access to 5 or 6 flood carriers, and now we have access to like 20. So we are able to find really great rates. Honestly, I've been sending out quotes that are $200 for the year for, new construction homes in St. Augustine. So it really just does depend. But yeah, if you're looking overall, the St. Augustine area is definitely going to be, a little bit more expensive than Ponte Vedra.
what about Ponte Vedra Beach on the island?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely kind of in the same boat as St. Augustine, I would say. And it is so, and something that did happen too with flood policies is before they would say, hey, you're in the X flood zone, your rate is $452 for the year. That was just standard across the board. Now they're really looking individually. So the homes that are on the beach, even if you are in the lower risk flood zone, they're going to be pricing that more because you have more of a risk than people that are inland. So definitely the coastal areas are going to, that's where you're going to see the price increases with the flood.
Okay. Yeah, I figured that. I mean, the interesting thing is, and Rachel, you know this because you have family members that are in the Ponte Vedra Beach area, whatnot. It's interesting is on one side of the ditch or the intercoastal, you've got a higher water level, higher above sea level. And on the Ponte Vedra Beach side, so you have more susceptibility of flooding, say, being on the east side of the intercoastal than the west side. I think I'm right about that. I think my contractors told me about that in River Landing, where there's a 3-4, and I'm like, that's so odd. How can it be 3-4 feet higher above sea level on one side of the intercoastal, and then on the Ponte Vedra Beach side it'd be lower? Have you heard that before?
I've heard that, but I think some of that is because it is the new construction. And my guess is they bring in some dirt, is my guess.
They raise the dirt a little bit. I guess that's true a little bit. But I know on the River Landing side, it's not, they're not allowing seawalls or anything like that. So, but you are right. You can grade the land up. So that does make a difference. Good point. Valid point taken.
That would be my only thought. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, I should have thought of that, but Rachel, that's why we bring you on. Common sense, duh. Hey, Rachel, maybe you should switch to selling real estate. What an idea. So the other thing I want to talk about is, because you said there's so many carriers now. I've talked about it in the past that the state of Florida, if you can't get home insurance, the state of Florida has Citizens Insurance, it's government-backed insurance, and they step in and charge you arm and a leg as well, but they're an option. But the state has so much liability, so many policies, that they were inundated that if anything ever happened catastrophic, they wouldn't be able to cover all the policies that the state would be in debt. So they've they've really made progress in trying to attract more carriers to the state of Florida, because we had a major departure after, which storm was it in Fort Myers? Rachel, I know you're going to talk about all the fun storms. Which one, Leah?
What, last year?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Well,
Like
we'll get to, there was so many, but anyway, I mean, the point being is that I know that DeSantis and Tallahassee, they've been trying to get more approval and more policies. My question is when you have these newer insurance companies, Leah, how should someone feel when you quote a really cheap policy or a cheaper policy by a company that's been around since 2022? I mean, how do you navigate through that when somebody asks you those questions about that person that's actually covering you, the policy?
Yeah, I mean, so of course that is with the new companies coming out, a big question that we are getting from the clients. So really what I like to explain is that, companies are, they have to go through a lot to be, accepted as an insurance company in Florida. They have to, go to the Office of Insurance Regulation, the OIR, and, provide financial statements showing that, they're able to pay out so many claims. They have reinsurance for themselves, especially around hurricanes. So I would really say those claims, you shouldn't be like, they definitely have the backing for that. But obviously, like how we went through in 2022, when we had, 10 insurance companies go out of business, we all thought they were great and A-rated and everything like that. So, I mean, it's difficult to navigate, but, all of these companies are going through financial backing statements, having to go through all of that with the state of Florida. And really a good thing too about being with the broker, wherever you go, if you're insured, I would definitely stick with the broker, because when that does happen, if something, worst case scenario, they've got options ready to go. They've have other, companies that are there. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to navigate a little bit. I will say that the newer companies that we've dealt with, we did just go through the hurricane last year with them, and it was smooth sailing. Like, they're paying out claims. They're really there for, and they want to make a good names for themselves too, and be able to stick around here in Florida.
Well, if you're going to broker for them too, I mean, I'm sure your company's vetting them as well, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. We don't work with any companies that aren't A-rated. So yeah, we're definitely making sure they're the top of the line, and we wouldn't want to put anybody that we wouldn't put our own, homes with.
Okay. Rachel, is there any other questions I should be asking Leah, since we have our, based on your topics tonight regarding storms and preparation?
The only question I really have is, I know sometimes people do kind of, worry about like, oh, well, if I don't have flood insurance, but I get hurricane damage, but then there's water damage, like,
yeah,
the insurance companies like quibble over where that water came from. And I know flood insurance can be relatively inexpensive. And I know it's always probably smart to go ahead and get flood insurance, but do you find that people who don't have flood insurance have a harder time getting water damage covered?
That is an interesting question. I mean, so I haven't personally dealt with that, but I do know that, when there is a storm, and, people can have, and that's a thing too, that people with insurance, they say, oh, I went through a storm, I have flood damage, but the company didn't cover it, like thinking that it should have been, but a lot of people don't know the difference. So if you have a policy, or just a regular homeowner's policy with the hurricane coverage, say, a tree falls on your roof and, rainwater's coming in. So, but yeah, then it goes to, okay, did that come from flood, or was that the rainwater? So really, but in a flood case too, most times we do see the water line on the walls. So that's definitely more, a claims adjuster situation, where they're going to come in, they're looking at the house, looking at the damage. I think from what I've experienced with flood claims, you can clearly see a water line on homes. So they can say, okay, it looks like that was naturally rising water, which is what the flood policies cover for. It came in up 4 feet on the drywall. If it was just rainwater coming in from the roof, that might look differently, but I haven't really seen that discrepancy too much. I would just say if you are nervous about it, it's best to know the flood rates, know what that would cost for you just to be covered in all cases. But the companies definitely are covering, rainwater entering the house versus just naturally rising water. But that can be a gray area. So it's definitely best to know prices and all of that so you can best cover yourself for, what you want.
Okay, so here, let me give you the short answer, people. $450 a year is a pretty good flood policy for the most part. Divided by 12 months, that's $37.50. Divided by 30 days is $1.25 of peace and comfort.
Yeah.
Okay, I have not been able to get a decent coffee for less than $3.75, $400, and that's pretty black and boring. Okay, I'm not talking any kind of latte fancy. So get flood insurance.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was gonna say it seems to me pretty clear. You should go ahead and
but people still ask the question, and I'm like, look, guys, you can do what you want. But I mean, what are we talking? $250, $300, $400?
right.
It's
It's just not as expensive, I think, as some people have in their head. They think it's going to be, flood insurance is going to be so expensive, and then
yes,
generally is a lot less.
Well,
people are relocating,
up here,
thousands of dollars. Yeah, it's definitely,
it's a lot cheaper here in Northeast Florida. That's
Yes.
why people don't know, because it is outrageous in other parts of Florida, the Panhandle, Southwest Florida, Southeast Florida, because they're so much more susceptible to hurricane category 3 and above hurricanes. And it's not just the hurricanes. Now we're talking about storm surges. And that's why I always tell people, I'm like, hey, if you're near downtown St. Augustine, I've only been here 7-8 years, and I've been through a lot of storms and everything, but man, half the beaches on the road, in St. Augustine area and downtown gets flooded, just like some of the riverfront areas in downtown Jacksonville. So good reason to have a good qualified real estate broker to look after your best interests and know some really good, smart insurance people as well.
Absolutely.
Because listen, you don't know when you need an insurance, right? It's just like a lawyer. Don't have to love them, but you don't know when you're going to need them, right? And so I always say cover yourself. In these times, we've had a lot of people where they were going to buy a particular house, and we've had to downgrade them to a smaller house to keep your expenses down because interest rates haven't gone down, and everybody, they're going to go down. Oh yeah, we've been saying that for 2 years now. They fluctuate. But I mean, if you're worried about $300-$400 a year, and I don't want to sound like I'm lecturing people, whatever. I want to sell houses too, but at the same time, I was telling people, look, guys, this is going to stress you out. I don't want to be with you building a house for 9 months, stressed out of your mind, betting on the interest rates to go down, where you're like, okay, well, $400 is $400. Then maybe you need to rethink the investment on the house, timing, all those kind of things. And it's tough times right now. I know, and I've seen a lot of people that have struggling with jobs. My wife's company just laid off a bunch of people 2 weeks ago. So I get it. So you have to reevaluate a bunch of other things. But one of the things you don't scrap the latte for $6 a day or $6 a week and pay the $1.25 a day to know that you'll sleep well at night and that you've got that coverage as well for flood. And so that's what I say that. But good question there, Rachel. That was part of half the lawsuits, I think, in Fort Myers Beach, was that the insurance agencies came in and said, oh, well, it wasn't hurricane that affected your home. It was flood insurance, and you don't have flood insurance, and we're not going to cover it. So that was some of the major lawsuits in the big problems. And I think I've got into conversations with people who live in the coast and real estate investors, and they said, well, what's the solution to this? I think at the end of the day, it's the solution, and this is a good segue, is the preparation of being ready for the storm. And then maybe also Florida has done a good job of adjusting building code and areas to readjust to storm patterns, and has changed because we are getting lots of changes in our weather patterns over the years. So we've been super blessed up here in Northeast Florida for sure, as far as not having any Category 3 storm hits. I think we've had one maybe in Jacksonville Beach years ago. I think it was 60s or 70s. So, we've been fortunate, and no one's going to, if you want to know how susceptible we are to storms, just look at your insurance rate, talk to your insurance person. Guys, they're not going to insure you for a low rate because they've done more underwriting studies on an area before they sell a policy to hedge their bets. So think about that. You should be calling. There's people that buyers, home buyers and sellers don't want to call. They don't want to call. Sometimes they don't want to call a realtor. Okay. And some of the realtors I deal with, I don't blame them. Sorry, realtors. I know you're watching. They don't want to call insurance agents. Sorry, Leah, not the most exciting, sexy job in the world. Okay. They will go and spend hours trying to read floodplains and then call me and ask them to help them figure out floodplain. Please call Leah and let her do her job. She sits in front of these flood maps all day long. Stop trying to understand and read them. Save yourself. The value of time, money means nothing. Time, the value of time, there's no value on it. So just call the person that deals with it every single day and just ask them directly so you know exactly what you're doing. And then the third person people don't want to call is their lender, because who the heck wants to undress in front of a lender? Okay, well, I'd like you to fill out these. They try to do it where it's the most innovative thing ever. Here's a link. I just want to know everything about your whole financial history, what you make, what you owe, every credit card bill. And by the way, if you don't provide enough, we'll probably ask for more later on when we're knee deep into this thing and ask you just to be completely naked. So just show them your finances up front, get it over with, and know that it's all in good faith to make sure that you're not getting yourself susceptible to risk. Simple as that. And get a good
You don't want to get over your head.
You don't want to get in over your head. Yeah. So, all right, Leah, anything else you want to add tonight? Because I want to let you go. I promised I only wanted you for 30 minutes today. I know you've been working.
No, it flew by, honestly. I'm like, let's do another hour. No, but I should have put a thing together with my contact info. But yeah, seriously, I'm here to help with quotes, anything you guys need, questions. It doesn't even have to be a quote. It could just be a question about really anything to do with insurance in the market here in Florida. But yeah, ask Greg for my info if you want anything from me. I'm here to help, and I'm happy that Greg, you invited me back. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. I'm going to put your email and your name and your insurance company on the description here as well. We'll throw it in there on the comments. I know that you work best via email, so email the address to what you're considering purchasing. And get Leah to send you a quote, and don't expect it in 20 minutes, but send her an email and she'll get you hooked up and go from there. So, all right, Leah, thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Guys, thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. All right, Rachel, what do you got?
All right. Well, we're talking hurricanes. We're talking hurricane preps, all the things. Let me get my screen share going. First, we're going to start with this headline, which kind of is like, oh no. It says, scientists prepare for an active 2025 hurricane season. This is just a prediction, and sometimes it's right and sometimes it's not. So basically it's saying they think it's going to be a slightly above normal hurricane season. But
is that just overall throughout the U.S. then, or is that throughout the world?
This is the Atlantic hurricane season outlook. So this is specifically just the Atlantic hurricanes. So, the tropical cyclone names that we have for 2025, this is the full list. And so far we've got to Chantal. Dexter's next. But really, you haven't heard anything yet. So what my point is that sometimes we have these storms and they just kind of spin out into the Atlantic and we never hear about it because it's really not all that significant. So, just something to be aware of. Sometimes they say it's going to be a super active Atlantic hurricane season, but sometimes that doesn't actually mean landfall. So, just keep that in mind. Also, something new that came from the state of Florida that I thought was really, really great. We have year-round disaster preparedness tax-free items. So the state eliminated sales tax on July 1st for certain batteries, fuel tanks, portable generators, tarps, ground anchors or tie-down kits, bottled water, first aid kits, and a lot of the food items that you purchase at the grocery store are already tax-free. So, the state of Florida really is doing what they can to try to help people help themselves. So you got to
encourage people to prepare and have those items on hand rather than waiting to the last minute.
Right. So we don't want to have a big rush to Home Depot like the day before a storm hits. So,
no more toilet paper outages.
Right, stuff like that. Although I don't see that as the tax-free, but maybe it is already. But I was looking through this whole list and I saw, okay, so in the state of Florida, they do a back to school sales tax holiday during the month of August for clothes, shoes, backpacks, school supplies, personal computers, or computer related accessories. And I also saw we're permanently getting rid of sales tax on fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, sunscreen, insect repellent, life jackets, bicycle helmets. You get the idea. So the state of Florida has in the past done these sales tax holidays, but now they're making some of these permanent. So
okay, cool.
I thought that was pretty cool. And that all just happened on July 1st. So this is actually the St. Johns County Emergency Management Hurricane Preparedness Guide. And if you go through this, it gives you a little bit of hurricane history and it gives you some ideas of what some of the hurricane warnings mean. Category 1, is kind of the lesser winds, 74 to 95 miles per hour winds, all the way up to Category 5, which is 157 miles per hour winds. So you can kind of get a sense of what all of that means. If all of this is new to you, what's a storm surge? This is a really great resource, and you can find a lot of things that you need to know. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking at moving to the area, take a look at it. And then before the storm, one of the things I always do is photo documentation. Mostly I just take a video, walk around my house, outside and inside, and just have that ready in case, you do have to make a claim. Then you can kind of prove this is what things look like before the storm. So then when the adjuster comes out, you can kind of compare. Another thing is sandbags. That is something that this St. Johns County does, is they will provide sandbags. They have sandbag distribution sites. They've already done it, I think. I'm not sure I think they bring it back whenever a storm is approaching. They will give out sandbags again, but they've already done like a sandbag distribution for this year already for people just who want to get prepared way ahead of time. And then also on this list, I thought was really great. They had this checklist, a disaster kit checklist and a document checklist, all the things that you would want if there was a flood. Make sure you have all your documents in something that you can just kind of grab and put up high, or if you're evacuating, you can just grab it and go. Like most people put it in like a tote, like a plastic bin, or if you have like a portable safe, have all your stuff there. So this is a really great checklist. You can find it on the website and go through it and just do a little checklist yourself. It's around this time of year that I always have to go around my house and work on my disaster kit checklist, because it seems like throughout the year, like things just sort of disappear. Like my kids use up all the Band-Aids, or they take the flashlights and, have a flashlight party in their room. And then I have to go find all the flashlights again and make sure the batteries work. So
that they turned them off. Yeah, I know that feeling.
Right? Like my kids are just doing like dance party flashlights in their room. Yeah. So now I've got to go back and make sure they all still work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the good thing you mentioned there is having everything accessible. I mean, Especially if you're in coastal areas or whatever, I think it's important to have all those important documents. My brother, when he lost his house in the Caribbean, they had everything in a plastic bag, specifically, and literally that's what they were hanging on to because that was all was left when they lost their home in Irma. So,
Yeah. So, I mean, I know some of those safes, they can be watertight. I don't know how watertight they are.
yeah.
But Amazon has them. You can always look for those kinds of things there. But I definitely recommend finding any sort of checklist online that comes from a reputable source. The St. Johns County one, I think, is a pretty good one.
For sure.
And just also, just know how to get alerts and warnings. Like your cell phone's great, but if your battery dies and you have no power, you need a different source of information. So I highly recommend getting a weather radio. A lot of them you can plug them in and have them battery powered. I think that's a really important thing to have. You can also get one of those hand crank ones or one that's like a solar powered option for a weather radio. So those things are really important to have. Otherwise, if your cell phone dies and there's no power for a while after a hurricane, those are just important things to have. A way to
do they include on the St. Johns County website, do they have a menu of the different kind of cocktails you can make while you're off of work on a hurricane day off?
Different kind of what?
So do they have recipes for all my people that are not making preparedness except what alcohol they have in the house? So when they're stuck in the house.
I mean, that is a different kind of preparation. Definitely have.
Totally joking. I digress.
Keep going.
Terrible joke. Terrible joke.
But yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, it's something to think about though, because if the power goes out, you'll want to eat up what you have in your freezer pretty quick. My dad, he tells this story. He was he lives in Mandarin, and one of the storms that came through in the early 2000s, he didn't have power for 10 days, and he forgot about some chicken in the freezer.
Oh.
So, so that chicken after 10 days was pretty gross. And if you were curious of how you get the smell out with that, it's vanilla extract. Pure vanilla extract. You can keep inside of your freezer with pure vanilla extract, and you leave it there for a while, and that'll get rid of the smell. So
yeah, we don't have a whole house generator, but we definitely have a generator literally to plug in our freezer and our refrigerator in the garage so that we have at least got some food. Because I don't know about you, but I mean, we've had here in Nocti, we've had in the 7 years, we've had a few days where we were out of power. In the last 7 years. Have you experienced that?
We haven't really had more than just a blink of a power outage here.
Yeah.
At my house, but we've only been back in Florida for 2 years. So we haven't experienced that. But even after that experience, my dad still doesn't have a generator. So.
Yeah.
It's kind of a rare thing, so if you don't have power, eat up what's in your freezer first. If you have a grill, fire up the grill.
Fire up the grill, baby. That's right.
And your gas, if you have a gas range, your gas range will still work, but the igniter won't work. So you can turn on the gas, but you'll have to use like matches or a long lighter to light it, and you can still cook. So you might not be able to get your oven going, but you can get the range going. So just, fun facts. I'm just giving all these little things as I think about them.
Yeah.
But also, I would definitely know your evacuation zone. There is a website where you can put in your address, and it'll tell you what your evacuation zone is. This is the entire state of Florida. So you can we'll zoom into the Jacksonville area. And I'll pull up the key in a minute so you can see what all of these colors mean. So here we go. So you can see, even in parts of Ponte Vedra that are over the intracoastal, they're in like flood zone B. or not flood zone, evacuation zone B.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily be asked to evacuate if you were in some of those areas. Most of the Nocatee area is in zone D. So it would be a pretty significant storm for that to be, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've been here over 5, 6, 7 years, and we've never had to evacuate. So I think two things that people always ask about our area specifically is, has it flooded or has anybody been eaten by an alligator? And knock on wood, neither of those have happened yet. So,
Right.
and those are serious questions. I know you're a local and you think that's funny, but people always ask that. Has it ever flooded here? And has anybody ever been eaten by an alligator? And I'm like, no, not yet. But now that you're asking me, my poor dog now is going to go down by the lake and get chomped by a gator now that I said that.
Oh, goodness. I mean,
but this is a good resource.
There's alligators in every water. So that's just my always my assumption. But
I will say this is a good resource. Again, if you're thinking about looking to buy in an area and you're like, I don't want to be bothered getting evacuated at all, then check this out. It's a great resource.
Right. And I mean, you can see there are areas that aren't in evacuation zones at all. And I think the state of Florida really, after it was one of the hurricanes, it was Hurricane Floyd that, and I'll show you some pictures of this. Hurricane Floyd, it was 1999. I was living here at the time, and it was one of those situations where this storm was just huge and it looked like it was coming. And so what ended up happening is pretty much the entire state of Florida. If you look at this, you can see, like, I mean, this storm was massive. Yeah. The entire state of Florida just pretty much tried to evacuate. So what ended up really happening was, Miami starts evacuating, and then, further up the coast starts evacuating all the way up. And then once it gets to Jacksonville, the highways were just gridlocked.
You're stuck.
You were stuck, and I was stuck in that traffic with my family, and we were trying to get over to Lake City, which normally on a good day is like an hour and a half drive. And I think we were on the road for 6-7 hours, and there were a lot of cars that were, stuck on the side of the road with no gas, and a storm's coming. And so it was just a kind of not a great scenario. You can see this, so Florida has changed a lot of things since 1999. And one of the things that they do a lot too when they're evacuating is they don't have just one way out of traffic. They turn the eastbound lanes to westbound lanes.
Yeah.
So things we've learned. But
what year was that?
That was 1999.
Okay. And did anything happen?
Well, it turned north up to North Carolina. So it really ended up hitting there, but it was just one of those scenarios where there's just a lot of people on the road. And I think it kind of was a wake-up call for us as Floridians that not everybody needs to evacuate. So that's why knowing your evacuation zone is important, and when to evacuate.
Yeah. That's the hard part, is everybody waiting to decide when to evacuate, and then everybody just starts evacuating at once. And we had that issue when we were in South Florida, where we were down on the south end, Southeast Florida. And we were like, all right, well, let's not go north. Let's just go towards Naples on the West Coast. And guess what? The storm changed paths and went towards Naples. So we're driving to Naples and we're turning around going, all right, maybe we should have gone north. Sometimes It's safer just to stay put and have the right preparation of stuff in your home.
Right.
And stay put. So
right. And everybody's thresholds are different. I get that. But I will say this is one of my favorite lines in this whole disaster or preparedness guide is sometimes a few miles is enough. Think in tens of miles, not hundreds of miles when you're evacuating. And I think this is a lesson that they really learned after Floyd. So just, don't think you have to get all the way to Atlanta. Like maybe just to like the south side.
Yeah.
So, and then, so sheltering in place is another option. They have another list of things you can shelter at a shelter. So a lot of those will open up and they'll always put out the information. And it gives you a good list of what to bring if you decide to go to a shelter. So, they do have some pet friendly shelters if you need that. And then they do have like medical needs shelters, those kinds of things. So they do have different options for different needs. Transportation assistance, like all the things. There's just so much to think about whenever you're going through all of this. But the more prepared you are and the more you kind of looked at it beforehand, the less you have to do in the moment when you're, just stress is high.
Yep.
Okay.
And this is all the St. Johns County site.
Yeah, that's all the St. Johns County site. So that one's a really good resource. And I found this article, St. Johns County successfully distributes thousands of free sandbags to residents ahead of hurricane season. So again, it's just another thing to pay attention to, like listen out for sandbag distributions. If you're in an area where you feel like water might be a concern, go ahead and grab you some sandbags.
Yeah.
There's an emergency notification system. I recommend signing up for this regardless. So this is one of those ways you can get messages. I think it's like a text message, and they will notify you of like weather things and whatever you need to know. Like it's more than just hurricane emergency alerts. And then you were talking about a storm. So this is the track for Hurricane Dora that was in 1964. And this is really the last true landfalling hurricane that this area has had. Meaning it came out from the Atlantic and hit right
Jacksonville Beach, right?
It was actually a little south. It's more, you see St. Augustine, like that's Volano right there.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of follow the path.
And
what's so fascinating
it hit as a Category 3, correct?
I believe it was a 2.
A 2, okay.
Category 2.
Okay.
And this was in September 10th, 1964. And what was interesting about this storm is that it kind of boomeranged back. So we got a lot of rain too on top of all that. And I found some pictures. This is Jack's Beach. I mean, Jack's Beach had a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Atlantic Beach. So it's, you can kind of see all that water. But that was 1964. So that was the last landfalling hurricane that we've had. And from what I can tell, I could not find any information on any fatalities. So I think there weren't any local fatalities.
Yeah.
Which is pretty shocking.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing they had was widespread flooding and power outages for 6 days. So,
right.
I'm looking it up now, and it doesn't look like that was the last direct hit landfall in Jacksonville was Hurricane Dora. So, yeah, it's been a while. So, knock on wood. Hopefully, we continue to have that beautiful luckiness.
Right.
And that's what keeps our insurance rates so low here, because that's the problem, is that insurance companies like in Fort Myers area, Naples and Tampa, they're trying to predict a storm hitting every 6 years. And then you had all this flooding every 2 years. They were getting hammered back to back just with flooding. So again, when you look at insurance rates in a certain area and they're lower, it's because they're banking on it, you being less susceptible. So far the odds have been good here in Northeast Florida. Right.
And well, I think a lot of times the Gulf Stream gets sort of credited for some of that. So I pulled up this map so you could kind of get a visual of what it looks like. But you see the darker red areas on the map, like down towards Miami, you can see like it's really dark red. And then as you get up towards Jacksonville, it's just kind of orangey.
Yeah.
Well, that dark red, that's the Gulf Stream. And that is basically warmer water. So warmer water feeds hurricanes. And So whenever a hurricane's coming and it hits that warmer water and it's right there off the coast of Miami area, off of the coast of Miami, that Gulf Stream is like maybe 3 miles offshore, where here it fluctuates a lot, between 60 to 90 miles off the coast of Jacksonville. So it's still, when the hurricane hits that Gulf Stream, it might get a little stronger from the warmer water, but then it hits the cooler water on the other side and it tends to slow.
Loses power. Yeah. Warm water feeds the storm. And so that's why people always question me, because it sounds so derogatory, because I go, Jacksonville is the armpit of Florida. And people are like, what does that mean? And I'm like, no.
It looks, yeah.
Meaning the way it looks, the Gulf Stream, because it's so far out. That's why we have to go so far out with deep sea fishing. Because when I lived in South Florida, I would only have to go, a mile or two to catch some deep sea fishing. In Jacksonville, you have to go out 30 miles to get out to the Gulf Stream to get big fish. So that's what saves our tail from these storms. The other thing is, if you look at that map that you're showing on the red areas, it hits just south of us, and then it also, where the Gulf Stream is closer to the coast of Florida, and then it banks towards the Carolinas up north. So
it kind of tends to follow that warm water. So
yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm glad you're showing this, because people don't understand. They're like, Gulf Stream, armpit, what are you talking about?
Right.
But it is scientifically proven that warm water is what feeds these storms. And that's why the whole Gulf Coast is so susceptible, because it's shallow, warm water.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm also going to share this tab. I went to Grok and I just said, hey, can you show me hurricanes, landfalls in Florida by county? And this is what it spit out.
Cool.
And St. Johns County, it gave 5. And it's not really meaning true, like we said. Right. It just means that that it was significant in a way, to have some sort of damage or significance. It was a significant hurricane for some reason. So
what is orange? I can't read it there. What is orange?
Orange is Escambia County, which is over in Pensacola.
Yeah. Wow. And then blue?
Monroe County, which is down here. You know what? I will bring up a Florida map. Okay. So blue is down here, Monroe County, right here.
Wow.
So, and then I'll go back to this chart.
Southwest Florida,
All right. So I'll go back to this chart. Lee, Collier, Sarasota, Miami-Dade. Most of this is South Florida.
Yeah. And St. John's is pretty much one of the lower ones there, next to, what's that pink and green at the end there? Is that?
Orange and Polk, which is so funny, because Orange and Polk, I'll show you on the map. Orange and Polk, this is Polk right here in the middle of the state, and Orange is right next to it, up here.
Right. So that's why it's got low chances of it. But look, we've had storms go through Central Florida before.
Right. It cuts across the state, and it still it can.
They did it it went through Tallahassee, through the Panhandle. But listen, the reality, it went to the North Carolina mountains, for crying out loud. But the reality is that the storms, when they hit landfall over a certain amount of mileage, they do lose strength. And again, we're not dealing with the winds and high power hurricane. We're dealing with excessive rainwater and flooding.
Right.
And that's what messed up North Carolina, is you had all this rain and it was causing mudslides down the river, and that's where a lot of the damage occurred.
Right.
Yeah.
So
interesting. I like that.
Yeah. So I thought that was, that was Grok. Grok gave me that info.
Yeah.
So did some digging, and it seemed fairly accurate.
You should tell Grok to take the color schemes and put it on the map for you next time too. Tell that AI what's up. That way we can see all the colors right there on the map. I like that. Very cool. Good information.
Okay, so that's pretty much all I have. Although I have one more tip. So, before a storm, fill up your bathtub with water, not for drinking, but so that you can flush your toilet. Because if there's no water, like if they have to shut off the water for some reason,
Yeah.
you're gonna want some water to be able to flush your toilet.
Flush your
You can
toilet.
use a cup and get it out of your bathtub and pour it into your toilet, and you can flush your.
I think that's a good comment to close on. We're at the top of the hour, so the best, most valuable information that you have shared tonight.
Yep, you won't find that on any one of those.
Yeah, it won't be on the top of St. Johns County hurricane preparation, but
no, that's your tip from your friendly Florida resident.
Load up your bathtub so you can flush your toilet if the water is out. Cool. Awesome. Appreciate it, Miss Rachel. At the end of the day, you know, I want everybody to be safe out there. And of course, if you're in that time of your life where you've been through a lot of hurricanes or you've been through a lot of hurricane warnings and you're like, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily want to live in Central Florida inland, but I do want to get out of the high susceptible areas. I don't want to pay high home insurance premiums, or if I can't find a home insurance. And you're thinking about it, the area, would love to be your real estate resource of choice. We're not in the business of guiding anyone astray just for a sale. We want to make sure that you're comfortable of where you're going to. I love it here. All my life, I've wanted to be near the water, but I've always had to deal with hurricane warnings. And so it's pretty awesome to be as close as we are to the beach, not being killed by home insurance. And then also not freaking out every time there's a storm. I definitely feel a lot safer up here than I do down in South Florida where we were for years. And then also the ability to just drive across the Georgia line and go up to the Mountain House in Blue Ridge is pretty dang cool. In fact, we're like, you know what? Why do any hurricane preparation or anything? We just pack our bags up and drive and take a little vacation for 3-4 days, and we got an excuse. So that's the cool thing about being in the gateway here in Jacksonville of Florida. You can just leave the state of Florida, go to Alabama, northern Alabama, go to Georgia or North Carolina mountains. So. All right, folks, thanks for watching and joining us. Next week, what are we talking about, Rachel?
Oh, next week, we're talking about the job market.
Yes. Jacksonville is blowing up. There's so much employment coming here. It's insane. I saw some of your show notes for last week or this week for next week, and I was like, man, there's some serious employment going on here, people. And I love that because where there's all these big companies and money coming into this area, lots of you are going to be moving here and relocating here for job stability. And Jacksonville has always been below the national, the unemployment level has been below the national average. So I'm super excited for that based on some of these companies and all the thousands of employees that will be hiring in this area, because that means you'll be calling me, people, and we'll be finding you the right house for you, asking you the right questions and finding you the perfect area so you don't freak out and stress out about relocating your family to Northeast Florida. So you can call me, text me, email me. My information will be in the description. It'll be pinned in the comments. We'll also have Leah's information there as well, so that you can get at least 1 or 2 insurance quotes as well, so that you can really understand what you're in the market for, your budget and all that good stuff. Rachel, any last words besides filling up your bathtub so that you can make sure you can flush your toilet during the storm?
No, actually, I was going to just say really quick, when we had talked about this job market idea for a show, I was kind of like, I don't know. But then when I started doing the research, man, I'm excited for next week.
Oh, you thought it was going to be boring?
I thought it was going to be boring. It's not going to be boring.
When we were talking about all the development in all the areas, people were asking, well, can you talk about the development in Durban? Can you talk about the development in Beach Walk? Can you talk about all the massive development we're having, all the businesses, hospitals, all as stuff that is being opened up? Thousands of people are having to be employed for these areas. And it is exciting because it's called growth. And there is some cool industry. I think people don't know half the story about how much industry here is in Jacksonville. And I'm so grateful for personal reasons for the medical, our medical hospitals and doctors and everything that we attract to this area with Mayo, Baptist and whatnot. I can't tell you how grateful I am for that just on a personal level. Being able to see some of the amazing smart specialists that work in our area. So that's just one field that we're going to touch on amongst many more. So, All right, Miss Rachel, we'll see you next week. Folks, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. We're also putting out neighborhood tours, home tours, all that other fun stuff. If you like to look at cool houses and you like to listen to me more or not, you can turn the volume off and just look at the houses. We post those on Tuesday nights, and we're here every Thursday night. If you have any topic subjects that you want to know more about the area and we haven't touched up on it on our previous lives, put it in the comments. We read the comments, and some of these show ideas have been inspired by you. So thank you for watching. Have a great night. We'll see you next week.